Lost is over, but we have to go back down the hatch here on RHAP. We know scripted TV. I'm Josh Wigler and Mike Bloom. We really do have to go back.
Here comes Captain America again, on behalf of the entire people listening to this, saying, I now understand that reference.
I understood that reference. Yes, here on the spoiler-free Lost for First Timers podcast, where Mike Bloom and I, who have previously talked about every single episode of Lost in spoilerific detail on Down the Hatch, are now, for the very first time, talking through Lost on a season-by-season basis for the folks like the Chappelles and Sarah Carradines of the world who are encountering
name names.
Who are encountering Lost for the very first time. You have a podcast to listen to once you are complete with each and every season, all of which is to say this podcast will contain spoilers all the way through the season 3 finale of Lost. Once again, that is full spoilers through the season 3 finale of Lost. At any moment in time, once I'm finished speaking these words, we will be able to reference anything that has happened in the third season of Lost. It is one of my famously long, obnoxious spoiler alerts, Mike, because such a big spoiler, a couple of really huge spoilers here in season 3 that I want to make sure everybody is very clear on. Navigate away if you have not yet finished season 3 of Lost.
If you hear that hissing coming from the mailbox, stay away from it unless you know the context.
That is indeed the rattlesnake. Of course, we want you involved here on Down the Hatch. Now that we are here on RHAP, we know scripted TV. Make sure you are subscribed. Rob has a website.com/DTH will get you subscribed to all the good stuff here on the Down the Hatch podcast feed. You can also send us your email, downthehatchrhap@gmail.com. When we are done with this full Lost series, we will take some of that feedback into account. That's downthehatchrhap@gmail.com. Mike Bloom, it's a flash forward. Charlie's dead.
Well, and interestingly
Mr. Echo
enough,
is dead.
Dominic Monaghan will, shortly after Lost, star in a
show called
Flash
Forward. That's correct. Mike, some of the biggest, most ubiquitous moments of Lost come here in season 3, for good and for ill, in a very complex, momentous season of this complex and momentous show.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting season because we'll get into the historical context behind it. But you often talk about the books of Lost, that seasons 1 through 3 are really one tome, and then seasons 4 through 6 are another one. But I would say that season 3 really represents a season of transition, that I think certainly the first half to 2/3 is really going to live in the past 2 seasons.
Or die alone.
Yeah, exactly. For better or for worse. Picking right back up where we left off, seeing a lot more as to how the other half lives. We thought the other half was the tailies. No, it's the others. And we get to build out a lot of mythos surrounding them after getting so, mercilessly teased with the prospect of Henry Gale, who does have a name in this season. But then we start looking ahead, flashing forward, if you will, to set up what's to come, and especially the way the season finishes in a game-changing, format-breaking twist and storytelling beat that sets up so much to come, and in true Lost fashion, sets up an answer while also providing many, many questions as a result.
Lots of questions here. We will do our best to resolve them all. But Lost Season 3, Mike, as we do this on an episode-by-episode basis here on the Lost for First Timers podcast, it begins by resolving at least one of the cliffhangers from Lost Season 2, which is, why on earth do the others need Jack, Kate, and Sawyer? I guess it doesn't immediately answer that, but it tells you where they went. Well, we go to A Tale of Two Cities, Mike, the season 3 premiere.
We need Jack to angrily do pull-ups in his cell. We need Kate to wear, a flattering dress and get perved on by both Ben Linus and Tom Friendly. And we need Sawyer to get clowned on by a polar bear game.
Yes. Pull-ups and sundresses and fish biscuits, oh my, here in A Tale of Two Cities, which in what's becoming a bit of a habit for Lost, a bit of a trend, is these seasons are opening with sort of this it was Charlie. And we have so much to talk about with Charlie this season, but it was Charlie who says at the end of the pilot, guys, where are we? And I think that the openings for every season of Lost so far, at least, have really leaned on that question in different ways. In the beginning, it's literally like, where are we? We've crashed on a deserted island, and we come to find out it's not as deserted as they think. In season 2,
we're not the only people on this island, and we all know it.
And in season 2, we're in the hatch, and there's a computer, and there's a guy, and what's going on with the treadmill, and why is all this happening? And now
that's the main question. What's going on with the treadmill?
I had no idea how to use it. And then here we are in season 3, and we once again begin with a character we do not know. We have never seen this woman before. We are in like some measure of like, if not domestic bliss, then at least a domestic stead.
Yeah, straight out of Wisteria Lane, a fellow prestige drama on ABC at the time.
There's a book club. There's some questions about the selection of the book club. There's some burnt baked goods. And then there's a plane crash, Mike Bloom. And we come to realize that this isn't just any book club. This is the Others book club.
Yeah, so as we will find out, the place where Jack and Kate and Sawyer are being kept is an island, technically another island, very adjacent to our main island. In fact, Ben is going to show Sawyer that at the end of one of these opening episodes. They are on Hydra Island. It is the spot of one of the many Dharma stations, the Hydra. It is also the spot where a lot of zoological research has been done, which is where Kate and Sawyer will find themselves for this first batch of episodes. They are being held prisoner inside of some open-air polar bear cages. Meanwhile, Jack has instead been kept prisoner inside like a very subterranean, chamber because there is one particular desire that is needed of him from the leader of the Others, which we had assumed to be this man formerly known as Henry Gale when he walks up to Michael and offers him freedom, etc. But it really does get hammered home at the end of this episode. He even gets a name, Josh.
Yes, Benjamin Linus. And the great Brendan Fitzpatrick, part of the behind-the-scenes crew here on Down the Hatch, asked us the other day, like, how hard was it to not say the words Benjamin Linus on the most recent podcast? And I gotta tell you, I loved the Henry Gale era. So it was very fun to live back in the Henry Gale era, but this is this guy's name. This is Ben. And now that you've seen so much more of Ben, maybe you are to understand that this is one of the it characters from the show.
Yeah, so I forgot if we talked about
he's the murderous clown. He's sort of a Pennywise type creature.
He does take advantage of everyone's fear and use it against them. Though I think more and more, the Smokey might become a bit more of an it in that regard. But
yes.
Ben, I forget if we talked about this last time, but the character played by Michael Emerson was originally only supposed to be on a 3-4 episode arc in season 2. But the story was Emerson, who was like doing stuff here and there, but was a bit of an unknown, just wowed everyone behind the camera so much in his brief time on screen that it develops into him becoming part of the main cast of this season, alongside the person that we see first in this season, a brand new character, Josh, and certainly an important one when it comes to New Otherton, which is sort of like a fan nickname of this Others camp. Juliet Burke, played by Elizabeth Mitchell.
Yes, Elizabeth Mitchell. She shows up here as Dr. Juliet, who herself is a very complex character as we come to know her across season 3 of Lost. I think the way that she was initially set up was to like add another point into like the love triangle situation between Jack and Kate and Sawyer. And of course, as season 3 bears out, there's a lot more going on the Kate and Sawyer side of things. So, okay, well, we can't let Matthew Fox just let his lips go dry, Mike. That's
not the only thing that's going dry.
We got to make sure that man's got someone to smooch. And so I think that was like the initial conception of Juliet. And thankfully, she's a lot more than that. She is so much more than just like somebody who's designed as Jack's love interest. She is somebody who is, in her own ways, a very scary, formidable person. You're left through throughout the season, questioning where exactly does her allegiance lie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can kind of talk about these first 6 episodes sort of in a shot. I still want to break them up in greater
or
detail.
at least from the Hydra perspective.
But I think like from that like sort of like meta view, these first 6 episodes of season 3 were released weekly, back to back. I
Such
think
a concept, Josh, in the year 2024.
6 times. And then the show went off the air for a couple of months, several months, and when it came back, it finished out. So the remainder of season 3 played from that point forward. But this sort of like first batch of 6, if it kind of feels like a mini season, that's how it was initially released to us watching it for the very first time. And the storyline was not like the most celebrated. I think in hindsight, I really, really like it insofar as it starts to explore the idea that maybe, okay, so the others have been like terrorizing, have been just like haranguing the 815ers, as we like to call them, for the past season and change, 2 seasons at this point. And so like everyone is like, okay, who are these horrifying organized monsters who are coming after us? And it's like they're organized to a degree, but they are also human, and they don't exactly have their shit together when it comes to civility within the greater group. Juliet representing a portion of people who are maybe not so satisfied with Ben, for instance, who is the leader of this group. Maybe Ben himself having a bit of a chip on his shoulder, or as it comes to be, a tumor on his spine, as we will
Is that the opposite of a chip on your shoulder? Like, you got a real tumor on your spine.
No,
you
I think
you know everything.
The opposite of a chip on your shoulder, I think, has to be a pretzel on your knee.
Why does that feel like a lost lyric to some sort of Americana folk song? Like, I come to Alabama with a pretzel on my knee.
Yeah. Running through the house with a pickle in my mouth. So that's sort of like the deal of what this overall storyline here is on Hydra Island. And like maybe 6 episodes is a long way to go to find out that the reason that Ben brought Jack and Kate and Sawyer here is so that Jack can basically watch Kate and Sawyer have sex in a polar bear cage and then be inspired to perform surgery and leave this place. So it's like, like maybe we could have done like, there's a little bit of like this story arc could have been an episode, I think, or like a 2-parter. But I think some of what comes out of it is really, really good. Some of the moments we'll talk about here, like the Red Sox footage, the Red Sox winning the World Series, or Juliet, who is demonstrating an interest in getting closer to Jack, whether it's because she's authentically drawn to him or because she wants to use him as a means to killing Ben, because we'll see that Juliet's not necessarily super happy here.
Yeah, she does the Love Actually.
Right.
I'm saying one thing, but I'm holding up the cards
Lost
to
Actually,
show.
yeah. So like there's some great moments there, but in the real time, if you were feeling this on a binge, I would be curious actually if you were feeling this. In the real time, it kind of dragged. Hydra Island sort of dragged, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of sort of a bottle episode concept, and look, the entire concept of the show has been bottled up at this point, considering that they're usually trapped in one location. But the fact that not only are 3 characters confined to one space and really only a couple of locations, but like arguably our 3 main characters besides Locke are confined to one area, definitely brought about this feeling of, for lack of a better term, cabin fever, and this idea of like, okay, when are we going to move this plot along? When are Jack and Kate and Sawyer going to get off? And the good news is by, the end of episode 7, episode 8, at least a couple characters are making progress towards that. We should also note, so obviously the big narrative push that we're going to go towards in this finale is the 2-headed Hydra, if you will, of the death of Charlie Pace and the big twist of, oh, you thought it was a flash. Yeah, the flashback that Jack has hit rock bottom. Oh no, it's a flash forward. And in this episode, we start to get, really the seeding of what would lead us into that trap with the Jack scenes, which is we see the aftermath in A Tale of Two Cities. The flashback is after Sarah has admitted to Jack in season 2 that she is having an affair and just driven mad with the mystery. Much like Lost fans themselves, Josh, Jack needed answers, and it's going to lead him into an incredibly dark place where, believing that his own father was the other man, he is going to accost Christian Shepherd in AA. And it's assumed that that is sort of what leads Christian down the path to relapsing in his alcoholism, which then leads to him botching that surgery from season 1, which then leads to him getting dismissed and going to Australia alongside Ana Lucia and eventually dying.
Yes. So there's I'm gonna probably at some point here on this podcast stretch the argument a little bit further as to how they help set that up, but they certainly begin the process of setting up here that at some point in the past Jack was in a really bad way. And so we get that here in A Tale of Two Cities. He's a real turd Ferguson here in the flashback of A Tale of Two Cities. Okay, so let's just keep moving it along here in this first batch of
sort of like with season 2, because our characters are kind of split up into different storylines at the end of season 2, they touch upon them in 3 separate episodes over the course of season 3. So if you remember, at the end of season 2, there was this big gambit, a plan proposed by Saeed that him and the Quans were going to take Desmond's newly found boat around the island to catch the others flat-footed.
Just imagining Naveen Andrews as Gambit now. I'm gonna have to make a name for myself now.
Honestly, I
think it would kind of be dope.
I mean, it's not too far from the rumors back in the day of Josh Holloway playing Gambit.
Yeah.
But basically, we found out at the end of season 2, no, that was all a staged area, if you will. The village was faked. As we now know, the others are living in quite the lap of luxury, even compared to the Hatch. And so now we really touch upon the Quan and Saeed side of things, which is mainly that a group of others are sent to accost them. And in the process, Sun is going to kill a woman by the name of Colleen, who is the wife of another man named Danny Pickett, who has some anger issues.
We'd seen him. He was one of the guys who grabbed Michael back in season 2, but then he becomes like a real piece of shit here in season 3.
Let's fill in our requisite down the hatch reference explainer. I believe that's in this episode where Kate and Sawyer for a while are put on this project of clearing rocks from this random clearing. Danny Pickett is sort of the one in charge of the project, and he says that those who do not comply will get shocked. And Sawyer replies, "Shot?" And Pickett just fires back, "Shocked." I said shocked.
He said shocked.
And so anytime you hear us refer to both shocked and shot in the same sentence, it's in reference to that exchange.
Yeah. Also, very interesting. What are they doing here with these rocks?
Probably some sort of polo area.
You think that they're doing like a shuffleboard?
Well, we know that there are horses in the jungle. We know there are cows at the flame station.
Do you think that that's what's going to happen here? Is that they're working on making like a Saratoga Springs, sort of like a horse track?
It's now the quadruple crown. The last race is on the island.
Okay, interesting. So should we add that to our list of questions? Is why are they clearing rocks? Okay, why are they clearing rocks?
And you know what they should clear? The Black Rock, because there's a whole ass ship sitting in the middle of the jungle that they've done nothing about so far.
It would be great if we got an answer to this one at some point in time. Glass Ballerina also does a flashback that reveals that, Sun totally boinked the other dude, the other guy, Jay Lee.
Jay Lee, and through Jin just dropping by to visit him because Sun's father...
he scares Jay Lee halfway to death and then all the way to death.
Yes.
He falls to his demise.
Because Sun's father, Mr. Paik, knows about the affair. And so just the presence of Jin, who, remember, is sort of like Mr. Paik's reluctant hitman, just shows up, sees Jay Lee at Paik's request, and puts the fear of God into Jay Lee to the point that he jumps out the window and lands on Jin's car. So that ties up that knot a little bit, though it does beg the question for most of the season. Still, who is the father of Sun's baby?
Who is the father of Sun's baby? So we will clearly, explore that a bit more as we go deeper into here. So that's the Glass Ballerina. Not my favorite. What are you gonna do?
This is I believe the first episode that I coined a nothing burger on Down the Hatch, which meant like it wasn't outstandingly bad. There are certainly episodes in season 3, especially, that are worse, but it's fine.
It's fine. So that's the Glass Ballerina, and then we get to further instructions.
What a photo!
Yes, in the video version of this, it is Terry O'Quinn just like belly flopped on the ground at LAX as We are going into what happened to the hatch after the hatch exploded. Further instructions is going to begin the process of getting into all of that. We're going to begin the process of Desmond's riveting story here in season 3. Desmond is up to be a series regular here for season 3. He kicked so much butt in season 2 that they have to bring Henry Ian Cusick back. And he is now just an incredible part of the show. And he is going to have Hurley's big, massive tie-dye t-shirt here as we begin the process of that guy could see the future. More importantly is going to be John Locke, is on the other side of the hatch blowing up, and all it cost him to renew his faith in the island having a purpose for him is A, his voice, and B, Mr. Echo's like entire physical well-being.
Yes, this poor unfortunate soul. It won't take much, just his voice, as Locke is rendered mute, sort of in a takeoff of what happened in the season 1 episode, right where he bangs on the hatch door. It seems like the island has kind of like robbed him of speech, and so he's taken on this sort of vision quest led by a returning Boone with Ian Somerhalder wearing a raccoon on his head.
Yes, it's not a great look.
It's going to take him through a trippy sequence where he ends up going through an airport and sees a bunch of characters. And then he will find Mr. Echo trapped in a polar bear cave and rescue him. And we definitely think in the moment, okay, Echo's life was put in mortal danger a couple of times. That means he's good, right? He's got the plot armor. We love Mr. Echo. He's totally fine for the rest of season 3.
Yeah. 2 episodes later. So this isn't the flashback is John Locke farms pot.
Yeah, it's regarded as one of the worst flashbacks
Season
in the show's
3 has
history.
a bunch of these types of flashbacks where Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse, supervising the show, would say at the time that like there's going to be an episode coming up. I'm sure you could imagine which one it is, where like, okay, we're now getting into like, we're not just like in secondary flashbacks for some of these characters. We're in like tertiary, we're in like their 4th or 5th. And like, we're starting to run out of like meaningful things to express about these characters. So like, do we really need to know that like Locke can like, you know, like Locke knows like a really sweet sativa?
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like you know, if this is like the most important thing that we need on the show, but it's what they can do right now. And so you can imagine by the end of season 3, given what happens in the finale, that some of these issues with the flashbacks, if you feel like they're really stale, you weren't alone, not just the viewer, but also the writing team really felt like these flashbacks were pretty stale. And we'll get to the episode that does it, but this issue actually is what's going to lead Lost to being able to land the plane eventually. So we'll talk about that a bit more as we go. Yeah. I believe this episode also introduces us to Nikki and Paolo.
Yes, so these are 2 characters that were cast for season 3, but unlike Juliet, they are not others. They were actually, Josh, technically, there the whole time, as we will see in their own standalone episode later on this season. They brought along these 2 performers in Keely Sanchez and, of course, from Westworld fame and Love Actually fame as well, Rodrigo Santoro, to play these 2 people that were technically supposed to be sort of like in the background, part of 815 the entire time. And now they have been promoted to the front of the pack. We see them in this episode where in their debut, they complain about the fact that Locke was missing and all of a sudden just stumbles through the jungle and makes this big speech, which really is representative, Josh, as to the entire perception behind these 2, which was not great, Bob.
People hated Nikki and Paolo. People really, really were like, after years of being like, hey, what, like the Arst thing of you guys are in a clique. You're so cliquey. You never invite any of us along. It's like, okay, well, let's invite 2 of them to become main characters. And they did not click at all. And so eventually they clicked so poorly that we're just going to bury them alive and forget about them. We'll get there eventually. So that's further instructions. The season is really humming along here, Mike.
Yeah, humming like probably Locke's ears are at this point. Because we should also reveal as well, everyone's good. Nobody died in the implosion of the hatch. Just an intense amount of electromagnetic activity that may or may not have given Desmond precog powers.
Should we ask that as a question? Why did no one die? Why did no one die in the hatch explosion? I'm writing that down. Okay. Season 3, episode 4. Every man for himself. A Sawyer flashback, the only Sawyer flashback of the season.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken. In which we find out something pretty interesting about Sawyer, Mike. He's a father.
He's a daddy.
He's a daddy.
So remember Cassidy, the woman played by Kim Dickens in that season 2
I do.
flashback, The Long Con?
Yep.
Turns out she's preggers.
She's the mommy.
She's the mommy, and Sawyer in his flashback gets sent to jail. He is brought in on this scheme to like get Ian Gomez to admit to something in exchange for his freedom. And then he's informed by Cassidy, oh, I'm pregnant, but I don't want you to see this child again. You're too much of a bad apple, Sawyer, and not the bad apple that the warden likes to eat lasciviously around him.
Yeah, so he has to go and deal with Bill Duke, who we got to hang out with a little bit on Battlestar Galactica.
Yes, very true. And then meanwhile, Sawyer's life, while his heart is breaking in the past, in the present, his heart might be kaput because Ben pulls off this little psychological experiment.
Little bunny out of a hat, if you will.
Yes, exactly. By telling Sawyer that he put a pacemaker in him. And it's basically like speed, right? If his heart goes above a certain beat per minute, he will die. And so it's very much Sawyer trying to sacrifice himself on Kate's behalf, leads to a little bit of tempestuousness within their relationship. And as I mentioned before, the big reveal out of this episode is, as the picture indicates here on the video version, Ben is going to take Sawyer out to the edge of Hydra Island to reveal, like, yeah, I'm not lying to you, by the way. But then also I did lie to you about the whole pacemaker thing.
Yeah, the edge. Is Hydra Island the edge of extinction of Lost?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly regarded a bit controversially.
It's kind of Exile Island. This is a little more Exile Island.
No, it had 3 returnees instead of 2.
Yeah, they had a lot of people who got to come back from this. Yeah, Every Man for Himself is an episode that exists on Lost. Like a few of these episodes here in the first going of the season are like, okay, it's a little bit of like, like, wait till I get warmed up. I think like that's sort of the energy here. But if season 3 feels a little bit like we're just spinning the wheels on this Dharma van, yeah, I felt that too. I definitely felt that a bit.
I will say, Everyone for Himself sports one of my favorite lines in
one of
Lost,
Mike's favorite lines of the whole show,
which is when Cassidy is meeting Sawyer in jail. She asks him to write a letter to the soon-to-be child, and Sawyer replies indignantly, "What am I supposed to write? Dear Goo Goo Gaga, she's a baby. She's ain't mine.
Baby, she ain't mine." Yeah, you love that. Be cool to find out more about Clementine at some point. That could be fun. This is also, I think, the episode where Kate says, "I love him," right?
Yes, it's where Danny Pickett, I think, like starts beating him up against the jail cell, right? And he's like, "Stop it! Why? Because I love him.
I love him." And so that's a big reveal. Does that feel like that comes out of nowhere, or does that feel earned to you?
I mean, we've got a lot of Sawyer Kate stuff, especially in season 2, right? When she's taking care of him when he comes back and nearly dies. And even though we had the caught in a net moment, it felt necessary, especially due to the fact that the two of them are going to head back to the main island together without Jack. It felt like it was teasing it along. And look, Kate is quick to fall in love, as we will see with poor Nathan Fillion later this season.
Sure, we'll get there in a second. But first, we got to say goodbye to a fan favorite from season 2 in a tragic, unexpected, certainly in the real time, swan song for the actor Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaje, a.k.a. Mr. Echo, in The Cost of Living. Lost season 3, a savage season, killing off a couple of your faves, and it begins here with Echo, who has somehow miraculously survived the Hatch's implosion, only to get fully effing rocked by the smoke monster just a couple of episodes later.
Yeah, so with, all the gang back together, and Locke now sort of the de facto head of the remnants of 815 in Jack's absence, he decides, okay, let's take a party to go back to the Pearl Station. Remember the Pearl? Yes, it may have been, something that got in my head to make me believe that the button wasn't real, man, but it did have some cameras into stations all around the island. Maybe we could use it to look at what's happening with Jack, Kate, and Sawyer. And so they're going to bring a group to the Pearl, which unfortunately does include Nikki and Paolo as well. And along the way, Echo is going to be encountering visages of his late brother, Yemi. And so Echo will finally confront the visage at the end, talking about how he doesn't necessarily seek forgiveness because he fully embraces almost everything that he has done, and he has tried his
best.
best.
Was his lot in life. Do you think he just fell out of the coconut tree? He exists in the context of all that's ever been.
Well, his body is about to get thrown into a coconut tree, as it turns out that Yemi, it was the smoke monster all along, as the smoke monster will absolutely ravage Mr. Echo and officially kill the character, as the last words he will whisper to John Locke are, "You're next."
You're next, he says to John Locke. So a few things. This is, with the exception of Bernard, this is the end of the tailies. So the tailies is a real flash in the pan, which I think is a real disappointment for a lot of folks. Another thing is that this was not this is not what the writers wanted. The writers wanted Mr. Echo in it for the long haul. The writers had a lot of ideas for Echo and what Echo was going to do in the grand scheme of the show. We won't spoil it here, certainly, but I think there are other characters who end up shouldering a lot of the material that was probably intended for Echo, and it's hard to imagine it going the other way now that, you and I and everyone else who has watched Lost has seen Lost and seen what some of those characters have on their shoulders. But it was the actor who was not happy on the show, did not want to be in Hawaii, far away from his life anymore. So he asked out. They obliged, and Mr. Echo gets sent out violently here. I think it raises a couple of questions on the show. Question number one is, I guess it's like sort of there's two sides to this question. What did the monster want from Mr. Echo? And then why did the monster kill Mr. Echo? I think it's like sort of the same question, or at least like two sides of the same question, where clearly in season 2, the monster sizes up Mr. Echo and flies away, seemingly intrigued to some degree by what he has seen. Here in The Cost of Living, he's telling him, like, come on out to the field. We're going to have a final sit down. You're going to tell me how you're feeling. And it feels like if he answered one way, maybe things go differently, but he answers the way that he does and he gets killed. What did he want in the first place? What did the monster want from Echo? And why did the monster end up killing Echo instead? I think is a question to put on the board.
Yeah, no matter what the answer is, it really is unfortunate. Mr. Echo was our MVP of season 2. Just a really awesome character with an incredible backstory. Even the flashback that he has in this episode is pretty womp. It doesn't really bring up a bunch of new information. And so it really is having the character kind of go out with a whimper instead of a bang, especially, again, only 2 episodes after he has this near-death experience and is saved, only to pop up in the next episode where he really does stuff, which is The Cost of Living. Then he actually dies.
Right. And then also, I think I always had issue with he said, "We're next," is what Locke tells the rest of the group. And how does that sort of grammatically parse out?
Yeah, exactly.
You are all next.
Is he using the royal you?
The royal you. So what were Mr. Echo's actual final words?
Does he just like the horror movie You're Next?
You're next. So I don't know, but it is a bummer to lose AAA this way. And unlike other actors who get killed off and come back like an Ian Somerhalder, this is a series wrap on AAA.
No raccoon wigs for AAA.
Unfortunately. So we hope you enjoyed Mr. Echo while we had him. An incredible character for the time that we get him. But a real shame that we lose him where we lose him.
I mean, the good news, Josh, is his Jesus stick will live on and give Locke some guidance, at least in the short term.
That's right. Okay, so we go to I Do. Nathan Fillion, oh my God.
You're Jennifer.
As Captain
Jennifer Coolidge impression?
As Captain Malcolm Reynolds himself is going to beam down from the Firefly to be on Lost in an episode that was sort of like the mid-season 3 finale, even though we were not quite mid-season into season 3. This was the last episode we saw in the real time for a couple of months as the Hydra Island story reaches its climax, if not quite gets to the end. Sawyer and Kate also reach a climax, Mike.
Yeah, so that is going to be the moment that really prompts Jack to be like, all right, I'm too much of a peeping Tom at this moment. Let me do some back surgery just to take my mind off of this. After Ben had really been trying to slow play
in these
him to
previous
get him
episodes,
to get him agree to take the tumor out. Finally, it is like Kate's last minute push to get him to do it that has him deciding to do the surgery that we'll find out later. Maybe there's some ulterior motives behind it. Meanwhile, we're going to find out that Kate talked about this all the way back in season 1 when her and Sawyer were playing I Never in the middle of the jungle. She said that she was married. And we find out that that was indeed true. She was married to a cop. What's his name? Kevin, I think. Kevin! Played by Nathan Fillion, who she does end up, he ends up finding out about her past a little bit, which is where we have like a really interesting conversation between her and Edward Mars, sort of like Catch Me If You Can style, where she calls him on her wedding day. But it's a representation to her about how she can truly never settle down. She always has to be on the run, which echoes very much so in the final words of this episode.
Too soon for echoes.
Oh yeah, and of this arc of Lost, as it turns out, hey, remember that girl Alex, played by Tanya Raymond? She's been mentioned a couple times before.
I remember.
Turns out she's in a little bit of trouble. Her boyfriend Carl has been captured by the others. We actually see Carl in the first episode of the season. You can never forget those nostrils you could fit a quarter in. He's getting beat up by the others. And so Alex makes an offer to Sawyer and Kate. If you help me free my boyfriend, I can help you escape this island. And it also is helped by the fact that, yes, Jack did agree to do the surgery on Ben, but he decides to use it as an opportunity to effectively hold Ben hostage. As he's operating on his back, he pauses at a certain point, basically holds a scalpel above a very vital artery and says, okay, you do what I want, or I will kill your leader on this table right now. Meanwhile, Sawyer and Kate,
which is not what Juliet wanted. Juliet has pitched Jack at this point, like make it look like an accident, and now Jack is going ballistic, and it's just totally hijack shepherded the entire situation.
Yes, and so we end on this big cliffhanger where it is Kate and Sawyer down by the beach with Danny Pickett, and then you have Jack on the walkie with her, basically being like, you have to leave me behind, leave now, damn it, Kate, run. Cut to black, Lost. And we leave the show for quite some time and come back in a very different mode.
A very important name gets dropped here in I Do. This is when Ben is on the operating table. Ben has given the explicit instructions of like, don't kill anyone while I'm under. Pickett's like, no, these people got my wife killed, so I'm going to kill Sawyer, who has become like sort of the scapegoat of all of this. And he's walking towards the polar bear cages, and he tells his other flunky, he's not even on Jacob's list. We shall hear the name Jacob and some other Jacobisms evoked across season 3, but I don't think that we leave season 3 with the answer of who is Jacob. So let's put that question on the board, Mike Bloom. Who is Jacob? What is his list?
Who is your Jacob, and what does he do?
And what does he do? So we'll explore that more as we go. When we come back for season 3,
like a 3-month break, by the way. I Do airs on November 8th, 2006, and Not in Portland airs February 7th, 2007.
It's a long wait. So it's effectively like a mini season and then a larger season here for the rest of season 3. Not in Portland. It is the first Juliet episode, as we come to find out how did Juliet come to the island, and it is a story of a woman who desperately wants to cure her sister of cancer, but specifically wants to see if she can get pregnant despite the fact that she has ovarian cancer. And so her scientific pursuits pre the island are really solely dedicated to that. The great character actor Željko Ivanek is playing this horrible dude, Edmund Burke.
Yes,
who
Juliet's
is
ex-husband.
Juliet's ex-husband, who ends up getting hit by a bus after this very handsome, mysterious guy comes to pitch Juliet on coming to work with him in a place in Portland His name is Richard Alpert, as we will meet him here, and we will see him again throughout the season. And she tells him the only way this dude would let me out, my ex-husband, is if he got hit by a bus tomorrow. And then he gets hit by a bus. And it seems like this guy, Richard Alpert, who is also palling around with Ethan from season 1. So we're getting to see some Ethan sightings here, even as late as season 3. They have a real keen eye on Juliet. And so her whole flashback, this person who's like cold as ice, as we see here in Not in Portland, she's going to go out. She's going to, execute Pickett and help Sawyer and Kate escape. She's already like shocked Sawyer. Like she is a stone cold
Not shocked
menace.
though, luckily.
She's a stone cold. Well, Pickett's shot, not shocked. And so she's a stone cold menace here in the present. And we still at this point in the show don't know how she gets from like that to this. Season 3 further illuminates it. But I remember really enjoying Not in Portland and feeling like, okay, if season 3 kind of started on a rocky note, things are like, this is like a real action packed episode of the show, like very intense, lots going on. The crazy techno room that Carl is trapped inside of.
Room 23, where he's wearing like weird light up goggles and is like watching odd, almost A24-esque footage of images of like Jacob Loves You sometimes appearing on the screen.
He just has to watch Uncut Gems on a loop. He's just like forced to just like mainline Safdie Brothers movies.
Yeah, exactly. So that's obviously a big question as well as to like what the hell was going on there. We have to take like a brief glance at it. I believe, is this where trying to think, is this where Mac from It's Always Sunny shows up as Arlo?
Mac from Always Sunny is here. Rob McElhenney is here. Blink or Miss It. Like, if you're hearing that now, you're like, wait, what? Like,
yeah, he was. I think he was one of the others guarding Carl there. But yeah, they are able to make their escape from the island. As meanwhile, Jack is able to kind of de-escalate the hostage situation. I should clarify, he's actually threatening to cut open his kidney sac, and it takes actually a like barely lucid Ben to kind of dissolve the tension there. And once Kate and Sawyer leave the island, Jack decides to do what he was set out to do, do the surgery, remove the tumor, and then basically be kept as a hostage thereafter. But yeah, this really is a showcase for Elizabeth Mitchell's Juliet, considering that, to your point, in the present, she is incredibly cold as ice. But we start her flashbacks. We start this episode with her in the sweltering heat of Miami. And we do actually the lock shot, right? The whip turnaround of her sitting on the beach as she is crying as well. And so it really does bring up a lot of questions as to
where is she?
Yeah, how did she end up becoming sort of like this heart of stone person? What has the island done to her? And it's especially very foreboding words when we see her like show up at the island and they say, oh yeah, you'll be here like 6 weeks tops.
6 weeks tops. 6 weeks tops. It's really not going to be that bad. But yeah, we come to find out it's more than 6 weeks. More than 6 weeks. Flashes Before Your Eyes is the next episode, and talk about a format breaker. One of the best episodes of Lost.
Trippy. Even it felt like we were in room 23 for 42 minutes.
This is like an A24 movie as well. This is a really significant episode of not just season 3, but of the show, in that we get to really explore like Desmond on the other side of what happened with the hatch, for whatever reason, has some freaky deaky connections with the space-time continuum, where we're going to come to find that it seems like he could see aspects of the future, specifically as it pertains to one person constantly dying. But also it seems like he is able to sort of like Bran Stark style, like warg into his past self. I think still some question as to like, is Desmond in this episode experiencing something that he's experiencing for the first time? Is this always how this portion of Desmond's life played out? I'm saying this in the sense of like, this is left kind of ambiguous on the show to some extent.
A little bit, but basically what Desmond gets educated about, because he's sort of whether physically or not, mind travels, if you will, back to 1996, where it's a rollicking good time. He's still with Penny. He happens to see Charlie in the square playing Wonderwall, which is actually very prescient given the news now that Oasis is back
Right. Yeah.
together. But he basically now feels like he has the second lease on life, right? Of like, well, my life has been led down this incredibly dark downturn path. Now, if I've truly traveled back in time, I have the chance to change it. But he is educated by this rather persnickety older woman who seems to know a lot about the situation he's in for some reason. Basically telling him, no matter what you do, there are certain events that you cannot prevent, no matter how much you try. That man with red shoes, no matter what he tries to do, if he doesn't get crushed by the piano today, he'll get hit by a bus tomorrow, Edmund Burke style. And give me that sodding ring. And so Desmond kind of learns that the hard way with Jimmy Lennon and the cricket bat. And so as a result,
And she tells him, right, like, you're supposed to go to an island and you're supposed to push a button. Like,
Yep.
you're not marrying this woman. You're not marrying Penny. This is not what your life is supposed to be.
And so he is basically forced at the end of this to break things off with Penny suddenly and mysteriously, to have him kind of continue down this tragic path that we found him in the flashbacks of the season 2 finale.
Right. Yeah. So, but I think that that's some of the question is like, was that always how this played out? And if so, like, why doesn't he seem to remember that? Does he remember that? And I think like the thing that I would say is when it comes to Desmond and time, whatever rules apply to like the show writ large seem like if there's one character who can kind of like break those laws, Desmond is kind of that guy. And you can anticipate that we will explore this more as the show continues. But the really big like plot oriented takeaway is that like Hurley has suspected that Desmond can see the future.
Right. He has this weird ominous comment at the end of episode 3 being like, oh, and just wait until Locke's big speech. And then he hasn't given one yet, but when he does at the end, Charlie then looks to Desmond, who's just like happily skipping stones down by the ocean, none the wiser.
Yeah. And so he's like, Charlie, that dude can see the future. Let's get him drunk and find out. And so they get him drunk. They find out. At least Charlie does. Charlie goes and brings Desmond over to like settle down. And Desmond says, like, yeah, I can see the future. Unfortunately, in the future, you die. And every time I've done it, like I went out and I saved Claire. I didn't save Claire. I spared you from swimming out to save Claire because you drowned trying to save Claire.
I built a lightning rod a couple of episodes ago because you got struck by lightning in one of these simulations.
Yeah. I keep trying to prevent it, but no matter what I do, you're gonna die, Charlie. And this was a really huge moment in the real time because it's like, no, they're not going to kill Charlie.
Yeah, and look, obviously the
They're not going
characters
to kill Charlie, are
the
they?
character's approval rating was in the gutter at the end of season 2.
Well,
but
it was through season 2. By the end of season 2, he's starting to take a bit of a turn, and it seems like Claire has kind of welcomed him back in. So, like the Charlie Redemption,
that's the last thing we see on the island in season 2.
You know, the Charlie Redemption tour seems like it's starting to tick up, and just as it's ticking up, it's kind of like, well, he was addicted to drugs. We got him off of drugs through a dark path. What are we going to do? Just like keep like putting him on and off. And so I think that there is this feeling of like what's to be done with Charlie as a character on the show. And Charlie, who is in many ways based on a great fictional musician in Stephen King's The Stand. I think that his story arc sort of mimics that character's in many ways of like a person who is had a lot of like success as a musician, is maybe not having as much success anymore, is in the throes of addiction, is a bit cowardly in some ways, and finds some purpose through these extraordinary circumstances. And when the moment comes that this person has to put himself on the line, will he do it? And certainly, as we will come to find out here on Lost, like Charlie will rise to that occasion. But in the real time of watching it was definitely like, they're not going to kill Charlie. Come on.
Yeah, but
they already had a shot, right? Like they hanged him. I remember, like I said in the season 1 podcast, is like no one is safer than Charlie. And like we were still saying that throughout the season.
But I mean, look at Mr. Echo maybe as a bit of a harbinger as to nobody is safe. But what's interesting is that this creates a solid narrative endpoint for this season. I mean, Desmond quite literally says, no matter what I do, you are going to die. It really set up this expectation of whenever it's going to happen, it is going to happen. Charlie is going to die at the end of this season. And it serves as also a bit of a microcosm of what the creators of the show were doing around this time, as maybe we get into the next episode as a representation of like where the show stood and how they also decided this show is going to die at a certain point.
Stranger in a Strange Land, aka how Jack Shephard got his tattoos. You will recall back in I believe it is House of the Rising Sun in season 1, where Kate's like, ask Jack about his tattoos. And it's just Matthew Fox has tattoos that seem incongruous with Jack. And we're now in season 3. We've done a bunch of Jack stories. It's time to explain what happened, how he got his tattoos and what his tattoos mean. And so we get a whole ass episode devoted to it, in which Matthew Fox's Jack travels to Thailand, falls in love with the great Bai Ling as Achara, who is a tattoo artist. She seems to make magic tattoos, and she magically tattoos his arm, and it says, you walk among us, but you are not one of us. It is widely considered the worst episode of Lost is Stranger in a Strange Land. This is sort of the popular thought. I have defended Stranger in a Strange Land on 2 levels in the past. The Jack in the flashbacks is a terrible version of Jack that helps perpetuate the idea that in the past, Jack was really at a low. He was, really down on his luck in a horrible way. It allows you to believe that when you get to the flash forward at the end of season 3, that that's part of a continuum here. So I think it helps to enhance that trick. That's more of like a utility that this episode serves than like a credit to the writing and the craft of the episode. But like, at least it helps that to some extent, that when you get to Through the Looking Glass, the season 3 finale, you're not totally sure what's happening until it's too late. That's thing 1. Thing 2, on the meta level, Mike, this is a very historic episode of Lost and what it allowed to happen next.
Right. I mean, this is almost like Jack himself. Sometimes you need to hit rock bottom to stand at the bottom of that tiger trap before Ana Lucia says, coming out, and a hand reaches down to pick you back up. As it was kind of a moment for the writers in simultaneous reaction to the fans to kind of look around and say, what are we doing here? We just came up with a flashback episode that has Jack hanging out in Thailand and really being the worst version of himself. And even on the island, there is nothing good going on. In the wake of Juliet executing Danny Pickett, she is tortured and branded by this random one and done character named Isabel, but really it's just kind of dealing with the aftermath of everything happening there. And Jack and Juliet kind of making this promise together that like, all right, we're going to leave the island one way or the other. But it was really a good representation of the show treading water at this point, that it felt, even though it had brought in some new characters, old ones had been discarded. And to a larger extent, it felt like the show had lost its direction. They weren't entirely sure where to go. They'd introduced so many things in the past few seasons. And since a lot of those had been solved, the hatch had blown up, some characters had died along the way. What was next?
Yeah.
And so it allowed as an opportunity for a bit of a tabula rasa, if you will, for Darlton to take a look within themselves and say, in a move that was quite nouveau for mid-2000s broadcast television, okay, we have a very specific way we want to end the show, and we want it done in this timeline. Lost officially, Josh, has an expiration date.
Yes. So they pitched the ABC brass on like, if you don't let us end the show, it's going to be more like this. It's going to be like this episode. It's going to be the Jack's tattoos episode. We can't keep getting away with this. So eventually ABC finally sees this episode. They're like, yeah. You're right. Like, we've got a good thing. let's be groundbreaking. Let's do the right thing here. Let's, try and stay on the right side of history. And so Lost announces an end date. There's some negotiations behind the scenes. Ultimately, it will be a 6-season show.
No movie.
So this, not yet. So this season, season 3, episode 8, Stranger in a Strange Land, is the reason Lost is able to come in for a landing. And whether or not it comes in for a landing, perhaps you have heard there's controversy around that by the end of the show. But
we'll get to that in a few weeks.
But that's not today's problem at all. And I think for many reasons, we should be grateful for this episode. I think Stranger in a Strange Land allows us to get to some greener pastures on the other side of it, including this is one of the worst episodes of the show, and one of my personal favorite episodes of the show comes next. Trisha Tanaka is dead, which is
also interesting because on paper it is believed to be a rather nothing burger, right? It is
totally
Hurley, Charlie, Jin, and Sawyer fixing up a Dharma van from a long time ago, and we'll find perhaps the driver of that Dharma van later on in this season. Again, on paper, what just happened? Kate and Sawyer, they're coming back. We need to get all these questions answered. This is perhaps on paper more of a hangout episode, but if it's a vibes episode, Josh, it's really, really freaking good vibes.
I love the vibes of Trisha Tanaka is dead. I think when you're watching Lost for the first time and you're very invested in all of the questions and will the answers be satisfying and this and that, Trisha Tanaka maybe feels like a bit of a frustrating episode because we are, as Mike says, just 4 dudes in a van and a dog and a case of
that movie before.
And a case of really old beer. And that's the episode. And it also has a Hurley episode. It's a Hurley centric where Hurley's flashback is his father is Cheech. His dad is Cheech, which is
Cheech Marin, his absentee father, who after Hurley wins the lottery, comes back into his life, and then it becomes that whole debate of does your father really love you, or did he just come back to get money from you? And now we deal with a lot of father issues and
it's unresolved, right? Because by the time Hurley goes to Australia to follow the line about the numbers further, and his father tells him I'll be here when you get back. And so Hurley has kind of been left with that note. And so I think this episode has more impact on Hurley as a character, certainly, than the Jack's Tattoos episode has on Jack. But I also think you've got 4 of the really great characters of this show hanging out with Vincent being on the crew as well. And Lost is a finite show. It's over. It's been over for a while. We have to go back, of course, here on Down the Hatch. But I think in the rear view mirror of that Dharma van, there is such nostalgia with this episode specifically. It's the kind of thing that you really can only get away with when you're in a show's era where you're not in an end game necessarily. You've got space to fill on the TV calendar. And so let's put these 4 lovely actors together and have them do misadventure. It's, the entire vibe of the episode is what Hurley tells Charlie. Let's say, whatever, man. Let's look death in the eye and say, whatever, man, we make our own luck. We make our own luck, I think, is a really great refrain coming out of Trisha Tanaka is dead. It's something that I've tried to bring into my life outside of the show. This is one of my very favorite episodes of Lost because I tell people when they're getting into Lost or thinking about getting into Lost, the questions, the story, whether or not that's ultimately going to be satisfying for you is totally up to you. But if you're not gelling with the characters and the mood and the island and the music and the vibes of Lost, then it's definitely not going to be for you. And I think this episode is just an exceptional example of all of those things on display. I love Trisha Tanaka.
And it's a nice check-in with the Charlie-Hurley relationship as well, which became a little strained and distant in season 2 when Charlie was largely associated with Claire and assassinating his own character, and Hurley was largely associated with Libby. We kind of have these two coming into this dynamic in very different places where, again, Charlie's been given a death notice, basically, and is trying to compartmentalize that. It's an important episode for Hurley in the entire idea that we were brought into with his initial flashbacks, which is that he is this big jinx, that the numbers were cursed. He kind of leaves this encounter with the van kind of dispelling that notion. As you mentioned, you make your own luck, and it leads to this like really heartwarming yet affirming scene of the two of them careening down the hill to jumpstart this van as Shambhala ends up playing in pure ecstasy while they're driving around the island. Not to mention, the van itself is going to have some significance in the season 3 finale, so it's not a complete filler episode.
Not at all. And of course, like there's a great reunion as Sawyer and Kate come back, and then the questions start to emerge of like, what about Jack? Should we do something about that? Because Locke has become the de facto leader of the camp. He's really taken a leadership role in the wake of finding his voice again, literally and figuratively, and echo dying and all of this stuff. And Saeed kind of like, there's now sort of like this begrudging adversarial working relationship between Locke and Saeed that was sort of previously Locke and Jack, or even at certain points Jack and Saeed. So it's these two guys are trying to like figure out what's the best way forward. Locke has Mr. Echo's Jesus stick. It has seemingly like pointed in the direction of a place. They want to go and figure this out, but no one is more motivated than Kate. Kate is the most motivated of them all. Jack seemingly like sacrificed himself so that she could live. She doesn't want that to be wasted. And she knows one other person who might be really motivated to do something here. And that is the woman who is the mother of the other who saved
the other
Kate
mother,
and Sawyer, the other mother, Rousseau. She says, I can take you to Alex. I know who Alex is. I know where Alex is. So we then get this, I think, pretty cool party. Like if this was like an RPG. Like you get into the phase of like Kate, Locke, Saeed, and Rousseau. That's a pretty cool foursome. That's a pretty cool squad. And so enter 7-7.
Yes. And so this party is going to find, stop if you heard this before, Josh, another Dharma station.
Yet another.
This is
right? Like a Dharma outpost.
Yeah. So this is the Flame, which is sort of like the information center. Like the Flame, as we'll see in a later flashback for Juliet, seems to be sort of like the hub where communications on and off island are being monitored, unless they're switched off in the looking glass. And so they are going to find a mysterious man with an eye patch who claims to be the last surviving member of the Dharma Initiative. Meet Mikhail.
Yes, Mikhail Bakunin. The Rasputin of Lost, considering how many times this man either gets his ass kicked or seemingly dies. Great, the great Andrew Divoff plays Mikhail, he of Wishmaster fame. And initially he's like, I'm the last surviving member of the Dharma Initiative. But Saeed, human lie detector as he is, sniffs out his bullshit right away. It's not long before Mikhail smells out that he has smelled out his bullshit. He has the great line, why do we continue to play this silly game when we all know it has moved to the next stage?
And they get in a big fun fist fight.
Very cool little fist fight. Yeah, like Locke is on one in season 3. Locke is on his own path, Mike. And Locke, while all of this is going on, he's just busy playing chess.
Well, what's interesting is, we'll get to this obviously later in the season, there's probably an idea that is living in John Locke's craw, which is after Henry Gale is discovered to not be Henry Gale, he admits to John, one of the last things he says in general before Michael sets him free, we were coming for you, John. And for somebody that has been told a couple times in his life that he is special, that he is almost a chosen one, but has been rebuffed at every turn. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me 3 times, shame on me again. I think he sort of
Is that how it goes?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of just alternates back and forth. For John Locke, I think this idea of finding the others is a bit twofold. Yes, it's good to rescue Jack, but at the same time, I need a little bit of a follow-up as to what you were saying about how you were coming for me. And we'll get a little bit of a taste of the others in this episode, tragically, as Miss Clue, who seemed to be like this fun, enigmatic character, right? The one that served as this broker for Michael in 3 minutes, who provided him with the list, who seemed to hold a lot of power, ends up showing up here has this communication with Mikhail in Russian and ends up pretty much sacrificing herself and is killed pretty unceremoniously.
Yeah, I would have liked her to stick around more. But she doesn't want whatever information she's got. She doesn't want to give up. The translation of the scene is like kill me and then kill yourself. But Mikhail doesn't get to do that second part. He just gets to kill her. There's all this information in the flame station. We're gonna go in. We're gonna get all the stuff, but Locke blows it up.
Yep, Locke ends up blowing it up at the end of the day with C4, which will now show up, it lived in the Black Rock for a while, but now it's going to be quite the explosive plot device to use later on. We do get an interesting Saeed flashback where he has now sort of gone into a bit of a different life. He's working in France as a chef.
I think for like the season 3 flashbacks is one of my favorite ones. It's another one where it's like, this is not like groundbreaking for Saeed as a character, but I think it's a really good underlining of him as a character.
Yeah, where basically he is accosted by the family of a woman that he previously tortured. And for the vast majority of the flashbacks, he is just completely denying the fact that he played any role in her torture in his previous life, only for him to finally come clean to her and truly show the remorse behind what he did, which again, perhaps showcase a bit more to the nuance as to the terrible things Saeed had to do when he was in the Republican Guard and how that is always worn on his heart.
Yeah. And there's a cat.
And there's a cat, Nadia.
There's a cat. There's a cat. We love a cat. Paul Ravion. A Claire flashback episode, Mike. The big deal here is Claire's father is Jack's father?
Yes.
Claire and Jack are half siblings.
So while all the best cowboys have daddy issues, all the best Australians have mommy issues. As it turns out, a raven-haired Claire, even though the bird on focus this time will be seagulls, she gets
Emily
into
DeRaven.
Yes, exactly. She gets into a car accident with her mother, who is then put on life support. And guess who decides to drop by and visit? None other than Christian Shepherd, her biological father. So what was speculated certainly into for the road as to why is Christian Shepherd in Australia? Why is he visiting this blonde woman in the rain that turned out to be Claire's aunt? Oh, it's because he found out about, Claire's mother's accident and decided to drop in. And perhaps while one child's relationship was deteriorating, he decided to build up another here.
Yeah. So pretty crazy twist that I think people were starting to put together before this episode came out, but just like one of those moments where like faith is rewarded. There's a couple of those.
That's the thing. I think maybe with an end game in sight, it kind of reinvigorated the creators to be like, okay, we teased out a bunch of stuff. Now that we know we don't have to sort of have this in our back pockets to reveal whenever we write ourselves into a corner. Let's make a couple of these connections now.
Yeah, which I love. I think that season 3 starts turning some cards over, and this being one of them, I think is great. On Island, Claire has an idea to like send out a carrier pigeon.
Yeah, it's one of these seasonal things like we saw with Bernard last season of people reminding themselves, oh yeah, we're stuck on a deserted island. We should probably try to
do something about that.
This is also where Claire finds out from Desmond about the flashes he's having about Charlie's death and how she basically tells him, like, I'm not giving up on you, Charlie. We get probably the best performance from Emily DeRaven so far, which is this like tearful confessional that she's going to give to her comatose mother on the way to getting on to Oceanic 815 and assumingly giving away her child, as it cuts to then her talking to Aaron about how she's not going to give up on him. But one of the bigger to-dos that sets up an interesting next step in our barracks crew, in our, motley party of not 5, actually 5, including Mikhail briefly, is we finally reach New Otherton. We find out about these weird sonic fences.
Yes, there's sonic fences.
That Mikhail is going to test, and at least for the time being, will make it look like he's dead. That you'll leave them on, and it's going to really, much like
fry
any bad
his brains out.
Yeah, much like any bad drive draft show, just like completely destroy your eardrums. Through some finagling with some branches, the party is able to get over. And Josh, football season's right around the corner, and I got a nice warm up here as we got this group sent in to go rescue Jack, who has, been captured by the others and is probably being tortured as we speak. Oh no, he's playing football with Mr. Friendly.
He's playing football with Mr. Friendly. He's just playing catch. And like, we haven't seen Jack in a couple of episodes at this point. He's been like completely missing from the plot for what? Like 2 full episodes, I
At
think, at
least,
this point.
yeah.
It's almost 3 full
Yeah,
episodes
'cause
until you get to this moment. And so, like, that's the longest we've been without Matthew Fox on the show by a lot. And so, like, it's a strong chunk of time for him to be away from our hearts and minds, to reference an episode title from earlier in the show, for him to, like, did something happen to him? Because, like, certainly we've seen the others, turn one of our own in, like,
Mhm.
even more dramatic
From one of us
fashion.
into one of them.
So, like, is that what's happened here? So, like, the feeling you're left with Jack playing football is, like, sinister and very playful at the same time, in one of my favorite endings of the show, especially with, like, him spiking the football and you get the Giacchino. Like, it's just perfectly timed. Really incredible.
Plus, it's just goofy to watch Matthew Fox play football. Like, only a couple degrees removed from the room. He just needs a tuxedo.
It's so great. It brings us really nicely into the next episode, The Man from Tallahassee, which is the many long-awaited things happen in this one.
Yep.
It's the long-awaited reunion of John and Ben, John Locke and Benjamin Linus.
Which we get a fun little beat when, after Ben was captured by Locke partially for so long, now it happens again as Jack partially for the episode holds Ben hostage in his own house.
Yes. So we get the reunion of Terry O'Quinn and Michael Emerson, who are two of the show's very best actors, and when they are together, it's electric. In this episode, we get the reunion of Jack and Kate for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, which doesn't go so well when she's like, "What the hell, dude?" He said, "Yeah, I made this deal to leave the island. We're getting on the sub, so bye."
He's gonna leave. Him and Juliet are gonna leave. That's the deal. They're leaving, and Jack says, "I'm gonna leave, and I'm gonna bring back help. I'm gonna come back." That's his plan. John Locke has another plan entirely, where he has taken some of the explosives out from the flame station, and he wants to. I'm here for the submarine. He knows that there is some sort of means with which the others are able to come to and fro. So he wants to stop that. He wants people to stay here. He doesn't like that the others are, in his words, cheating. That you're in
You're
here
a
with
Pharisee.
you're in here with refrigerated chicken. This is not how it's supposed to be. Locke with, like, a lot of cojones to tell this guy, like, this is how it's supposed to be.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that Locke's mind is going to be opened instrumentally at the tail end of season 3. Open, perhaps, Josh, like a magic box.
Indeed, because this episode also reveals, if the previous flashbacks have left something to be desired here in season 3, this is a big one. Where
this is yet another box that gets checked in our character, not even character connections, but questions that have been left unanswered.
Questions that have been left unanswered, which I'm starting to lose track of, and that's lost for you folks. But one of our questions back in season 1 was, why can Locke walk? We don't have an answer to that, but the flip side of that question was, how did Locke get into the wheelchair? And the show is constantly playing with that in the Locke episodes. We're like, he's almost hit by a car, or the kidney thing, could something have gone wrong in surgery? No, it just ends up that his horrible father actually factually pushed him out a window and tried to kill him.
Yeah, so this was actually a flashback that I mixed up in season 2. This is the one where Locke is approached by a man who is the son of a woman who Anthony Cooper recently married. And he has a hunch that, like, this guy is up to no good. He's trying to basically, like, bleed my mom for all that she's worth. Can you try to catch him in the act? And Locke decides, just when I think I'm out, they pull me right back in, or in this case, they push me out a window. As in this big scene, he confronts Anthony Cooper about it. Anthony Cooper says, like, all right, you got me. Just get on the phone there. Call the police. I'll comply. And as Locke goes onto the phone, Anthony Cooper tackles him out the window. What is it? 8 stories.
8 stories. There's that number again.
Doesn't die, but loses the use of his legs.
Yeah. So we now no longer have to ask, how did Locke wind up in the wheelchair? That's how. And it's such a shocking moment. And even, like, the cut to commercial is so brutal when he hits the ground, and it is like the sound of, like, both broken glass, but broken back. And you imagine like broken heart to some degree. Locke has just constantly been chasing answers and answers and answers and meaning. He's on a quest constantly for meaning, as we see on his like present day storyline. But here in the flashback, all he wants is to know, why doesn't his daddy love him? Why is his dad doing this? Why is his dad doing that? And those answers lead to him just life pushing him out a window. Is what goes on with John Locke.
But you know what they say, as one window gets shattered, a door opens, and the door opens to, as Ben had sort of been pontificating on with John, like he has so much access. He is so ubiquitous that he has a magic box that can make anything appear. And this is not in anything, but in anyone. As the picture for this episode indicates, the episode ends with Ben showing Locke a subdued Anthony Cooper. And a gobsmacked Locke, all he can say is, Dad?
Dad?
And then the episode ends.
Kong. So somehow Anthony Cooper is here. But we'll have to put a pin in that, because first we got to bury Nikki and Paolo alive in Expose. Another one of these episodes that is probably like the most divisive one. This might be the most divisive episode of Lost, I think, is Expose. You either love Expose or you hate Expose.
Yeah.
Expose is either that episode. It's like, why does this exist? Couldn't we have just pretended like Nikki and Paolo were never here at all? And then there's the other point that's like, that would have been really weird to just like have them completely disappear into the background. Wouldn't it be better if we had like this sort of whodunit mystery in which like it's all told from the flashback, presumably of two characters who have died at the start of the episode, and we're getting to see people like Shannon again and Arst and some of these people. We get to see like the 815 crash again and all of that, only for it to turn out that they're just like horrible diamond thieves, and Paolo took a shit in the Pearl Station, but not really. He actually just stored his diamonds there. And in fact, can you believe it? Nikki and Paolo found the Pearl Station before anybody else found the Pearl Station. And in fact, they also have it out for each other. They try to murder. She tries to murder him because he just wants to hide the diamonds because he's scared that she's not going to love him anymore if she finds out that he's got the diamonds, and so he's hiding them. And he's right, because she's terrible, and she's like, I'm going to kill you with spiders, except I'm not going to kill you. I'm just going to paralyze you with the spiders.
That's pronounced paralyzed.
But now the spiders have bitten me, and so actually we're not dead. We're just paralyzed, and pretty soon we'll wake up. We just got to wait it out. But no, everybody else on the island, led by Sawyer and Hurley, think that we're dead, so they're actually going to hold a funeral for us and bury us in the place where all the other people have been buried and held funerals for. And as they're throwing dirt on us, we're going to have our eyes open at the end of the episode. And so now canonically, Hurley has buried two human beings alive, and Hurley has like the bodies of Nikki and Paolo under his belt as clean, dirty kills.
This is the
other
new
camp
Hurley.
that's like, oh, by the way, also Billy D. Williams is in this episode as Billy D. Williams. So like, there's the people who don't like this episode, and then there's the smart people who love it.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
That's my take.
It's the most meta episode of Lost ever, to the point where the Act 1 closer is Nikki comes, falling out of the jungle and seemingly dies, and someone says like, oh my god, Nikki and Paolo are dead, and Sawyer says, who the hell are Nikki and Paolo? That's the tone of this episode. This is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, where we find out that Nikki and Paolo, Nikki is a TV star who is like not only headlining her own action schlocky show starring Billy D. Williams, but is also at the same time betting the lead director. Paolo is his personal chef, and it turns out they were colluding together to kill him and steal all his diamonds and abscond with them. But wouldn't you know it, Josh, they happen to crash land on an island. And so all the flashbacks are basically getting their perspective behind all the things that are happening, as at the same time on the island, we get our own little form of CSI, as all the characters that were left behind, even though that's the name of the next episode, are basically trying to solve this mystery together. I mean, during this sort of like hiatus in the wake of Stranger in a Strange Land, again, the creators really put their heads together to figure out how they wanted to end the show. They also took a lot of listener feedback. They heard loud and clear from the first 8 episodes of this season, they did not like Nikki and Paolo. Either they were useless, they were annoying, or they were both. And so in
They
one of the
say that they sensed it first, you know, they were far enough in the writing to know like, oh, well, this really didn't work. And we listened to the audience and like put these two people, like we like created characters from the background, but they're not fitting in. And then like those episodes start coming out. It's like, yeah, we all agree. And so Expose is just like a giant mea culpa.
It's one of the most cathartic episodes of television I can remember in quite some time, where it's simultaneously the showrunners apologizing to the audience, but also them getting their digs in on characters that they created, yet they did not enjoy at all by the time that they killed them off. It has something that you and I argued a lot about back and forth, Josh, on the podcast as to like whether or not this is the darkest ending in Lost history. We'll talk about another possibility a couple of weeks from now. It is certainly up there, no matter how you feel about it. Again, the fact that Hurley, who has a new lease on life, decides to snuff out two others.
He doesn't know. He doesn't know what he's done. He doesn't know. He killed these people.
These people are dead. So it's very much like, imagine Poochie going off to his home planet, but also like the rocket exploding on the way home. Like they killed these characters off in style and really showcase that, again, season 3 does death in a certain way.
Yeah, I love Expose. Not for everybody, totally fine, extremely for me. Left Behind, this deals with the immediate ramifications of the submarine has exploded. Juliet's deal has seemingly been rescinded upon. And also we're going to find out that Kate has a different kind of connection to Sawyer than either of them know. They've got a friend, or at least an important person in common.
Yeah, so we find out through flashback that during one of the many times Kate is on the run, she will have a run-in with Cassidy as well. So that is very interesting. Maybe like two ships passing in the night of lovers of Sawyer. On the island, it's almost like a storyline out of a fan fiction where everyone is at the barracks, and then one morning, everyone basically gets gassed. The others have moved on to their next plan, and that plan does not involve a couple of people, namely, Jack namely Locke goes with them. Everyone else is, for lack of a better term, left behind, including Juliet, who wakes up in the jungle handcuffed to Kate. And initially, it is this tension over almost like the two women in Jack's life and them not getting along. It's later revealed that this was a bit of a plan on Juliet's behalf. She had the key to the handcuffs that she unlocks during a time of need to unlock the sonic fences. But regardless of that tension, Juliet is at least in the moment brought back to the main group of 815 as we have yet another reunification of groups.
Yes. So we've got the whole gang together. Kate is friends with Cassidy. So she and Cassidy have the Sawyer connection. And the smoke monster doesn't like that sonic fence.
Yeah. And also interesting, we have a fun little B plot of Hurley telling Sawyer,
oh yeah,
hey, just so you know, like your name is on the chopping block.
This is very Survivor. This plot.
If we were to have a vote tonight, you would be banished from the camp because nobody likes you. Despite all this character development, you're still the same asshole that we know and don't love. So you got to start improving your rep around the camp. So Sawyer is treated to a whole day of doing good Samaritan things,
right?
Only for Hurley to basically reveal
it's a test.
Yeah, that it was sort of a long con over an episode, in that he said, Locke's gone, Jack's gone at the moment. The island needs a leader right now, and you're the best thing we have.
Yeah, Hurley is telling Sawyer, Hurley, who's orchestrated this entire Easter egg hunt. Like, I feel like that's some leadership chops right there. But he's telling Sawyer, like, you're the guy. And this is on the other side of Expose, where it comes out that Sawyer and Charlie were the ones who kidnapped Sun.
Which they kind of just gloss over. They're like, yeah, it's fine. No one got hurt.
Sun punches Sawyer in the face. So like that's sort of his comeuppance. But she says, I'm not going to tell Jin, because if I did, we'd have to dig another grave.
Yeah, he'd go back to season 1 Jin in a heartbeat.
Yeah, so we'll just bury that secret with Nikki and Paolo. But on the other side of it, people were mad at him. So Sawyer is just kind of he's in the doghouse right now. One of Us, the Juliet story continues. We get the flashback of Juliet's initial entry to the island and being one of the others. And the title, of course, is a response to the call of one of them, the first Benjamin Linus episode, of Lost back in season 2, and Jack saying they left her behind. She's one of us now. And the rest of the camp really not jiving with that idea. Saeed not liking it. Sawyer really out on the idea.
Yeah, and look at that. Juliet is such a divisive force that these two guys who were beating up on each other in the pilot episode decide to join together to weasel out what Juliet's ulterior motivations are.
Yeah, so she's meanwhile, like, something has happened to Claire. Claire is sick. And Juliet, being Dr. Juliet, is the one who can fix it. She's like, I know where there's secret medicines. Let me go find the secret medicines. And she's gonna go and she's gonna say, it's all a con, Mike.
Yep, it's going to be revealed at the end that, you know, she is like radioing with Ben a little bit, basically that she was the one that made Claire sick so that she appears like the hero in the moment, someone to trust as she, you know, smiles while tying knots next to Jack without him being the wiser that she is indeed, as John Locke will say in the future, a mole. And then in the past, we get more important information about Juliet's arrival to the island, and in particular, the fact that 6 weeks turns into 6 months. And the fact of the matter is we find out even more of why Juliet was brought on, and that, again, she is a fertility doctor. And all the pregnant women on the island, Josh, keep dying.
Why?
For some reason.
Why is this happening?
Who knows? And so Juliet is really saying, like, Ben, I've had it up to here at this point. Like, my work is fruitless. I know I haven't accomplished what you asked me to do, but I need to leave right now. And Ben does another magic box moment here where he goes to the flame station and shows Juliet that not only is her sister alive and well, but she has like a bouncing baby girl and is running around and playing with. And that reinvigorates Juliet / like devastates her in the moment that she has more work to do. And also something to note that maybe we could touch upon later. Juliet has a bit of a paramour as well. Remember Goodwin?
Yeah,
remember the other who was the malevolent force behind the tailies in season 2 and killed a bunch of people before Ana Lucia killed him?
I recall him, yeah.
He was boinking Juliet for a brief period of time.
Wow. All right. Juliet, getting it. Love that. But yeah, Juliet also is, as we will hear later, Juliet is a mole. She is still team others, it seems like, at least at this point, based on this final scene where she and Ben have this conversation the night before before everybody gets gassed. So the plan is, we'll see in a week. We're going to take the people that we want to take, and we're going to just write these guys off because they're too much trouble for what they're worth. So that's the big to-do of One of Us. Catch-22, second Desmond episode of the season. Less experimental than what we got earlier in the season, but he is still having flashes. Desmond seems to be having flashes of Penelope. He thinks that Penelope has come to the island. So we are responding to the season 2 cliffhanger here, where it was, sort of promised to us that somebody is looking for them and seemingly has gotten like a major clue in the Purple Sky incident. And so somebody is here, and it's not Penny. It's a woman named Naomi ultimately, but she is going to have Penny's picture on her person, and Desmond is going to lead an expedition into the jungle to find her. Another great vibes episode with Jin and Hurley and Charlie as the Desmond crew.
Yeah, the vibes are a little harsh in the beginning when we actually get to see one of Desmond's flashes as Charlie is having a fierce debate as to whether or not Superman or the Flash are faster. He just gets an arrow straight into his trachea.
Yeah, he just gets killed, but it's just a vision. But Desmond thinks that the vision has to happen in order for him to see Penny. And ultimately, like, the question is, like, will Desmond be able to, like, go through with that? Does he love Penny so much that he would let a man be killed? It's kind of a different version of the Michael problem.
Yeah.
Of like, does Michael love Walt so much that he's willing to kill to save Walt? Desmond's answer is different. He's ultimately not willing to let Charlie die just so he can be reunited with Penny. But I think a really fun episode on a lot of levels, like Jin's ghost story.
Yes, which is very fun because it's entirely in Korean, so it's just no response.
A very cute episode, meet cute episode in the story. This flashback ends up being how Desmond and Penny met.
Yeah, because Desmond, before joining the army, was also was also a priest, and so
What a
that is
journeyman.
which I know that we are on the other side of like the bottom of the barrel, how Jack got his tattoos. I will say why Desmond keeps saying brother. This is like a backdoor explanation as to why he does that,
Maybe.
because he was formerly a monk. There's also an interesting B plot where now that Jack has finally come back to 815, like 2/3 of the way through the season, him and Sawyer have a nice, dick measuring contest by playing ping pong.
Yeah, they play ping pong. That's fun. That's fun on the other side of when they played cards. But
Mhm.
this time it's more for fun, just like two dudes playing ping pong, just some table tennis here out on the island. But it's also, I think, a significant episode in that it's catapulting us into season 3's end game. This idea that there are people just on the periphery of the island.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? What is that going to turn into? It's going to get explored right away. DOC, Doc.
Which
Next
is what Sawyer was
episode.
yelling at Jack after he lost in ping pong.
That's right. Every single time. And this is Jin and Sun. This is the episode where we're going to find out that Jin is the father.
Yes, so
Which
Juliet
is
is
great news because, oh, hooray, it's Jin's kid. But it's bad news because people who get pregnant on the island apparently don't live.
Yeah, they die alone, unfortunately. And so Juliet, despite being in her enigmatic era of like, well, technically I'm still being undercover on behalf of the others, does take interest in the fact that Sun is pregnant. And so really through like her Hippocratic oath bearing out above all, decides to take her to the staff, which again, remember is the derelict medical facility that Claire was kidnapped to in season 1. And there she's able to give her a sonogram and is able to identify the fact that the baby is Jin's. And yeah, I don't believe no, she does tell Sun, right, that like she is going to die. And so she says, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But Sun is in happy tears. All she cares about is the fact that it is Jin's baby at the end of the day. And meanwhile, we're going to be having, our campers dealing with Naomi, who is very badly injured from parachuting onto the island. And as again, the picture indicates, somehow Josh Mikhail returned.
The live version, the video version of this podcast, you can check us out, the We Know Scripted YouTube page. Jin just has Mikhail in a headlock, and Mikhail's face is crazy. Huge props to our producer, Jess Sterling, who chose this as the screen grab because it's killing me right now. Although it's unfortunately not killing Mikhail. Nothing can, it seems like.
Yeah, so Mikhail is actually going to get brought in because he is a bit of a medic. Naomi got a big old branch sticking out of her lung, and so he is going to stabilize her. And now that she is cogent, Josh, she has more bombs to drop as she is, just casually chatting with Hurley at the end of this episode. And he is going to explain to her, yeah, we're the survivors of Oceanic Flight 815. And she gives a confused expression and says that there were no survivors on Oceanic 815. Josh, they were dead the whole time.
They were dead the whole time. Don't get me started. But there's the ending of this is a great GIF. When you search for lost GIFs, it is just like the dramatic Giacchino music as the camera is zooming in on Hurley's face, and then finally he's just like, "What?" Which is just great. Really, really funny. The Brig, aka the best episode of Lost, Mike. This is not actually the best episode of Lost, probably, though. I think stealthily this might be one of the very best episodes of Lost in how it resolves one of the longest standing feuds of the show, Sawyer versus Sawyer, while also resolving another of the longest lasting feuds on the show, Locke versus Anthony Cooper, aka Locke versus Sawyer, because it turns out that Tony Coops and the OG Sawyer that James Ford has been looking for this whole time are the same guy, and we finally have him in the right place, exactly where we want him. And it turns out, Mike, revenge is it might be a dish best served cold because it's really hot here in the jungle and it doesn't taste as sweet as Sawyer thought it might.
So this is a big episode, and I think
Love this episode.
This really kickstarts the end game of Lost, you and I have said, is one of the best episode stretches in series history. And it really gets off to a propulsive start, or explosive start, ironically enough, that the climax takes place within the brig of the Black Rock. This is also, besides the other 48 days, one of our big, further instructions, the Claire season 2 episode, one of our big on island flashback episodes. Now that we have the question answered as to how Locke wound up in the wheelchair, instead, a lot of the flashbacks are going to center around Locke being with the others. Again, he decided to stay with them as they gassed everyone else and went off to parts unknown. And we find out that Locke himself is going to get kind of shirked by the others in the process, that he is not necessarily seen as somebody who has what it takes to fall in the good graces of Ben or even someone like Jacob by proxy. And so Locke gets left behind and decides to concoct a little plan in the middle of the night. While Sawyer is barefoot, Locke is going to rouse him and basically say, "Come with me. I've got a little something to show you." He's going to lead him to the Black Rock, again, the big ship in the middle of the jungle, and lock him in a room with his father. And as the two of them pontificate, seemingly strangers, Anthony Cooper is under the resolute belief that he has died and gone to hell, a little hot for heaven, that he is finally paying for all the various sins that he is committed. And one of those sins that he reveals is that he is a con man that has gone by many names. And one of the names he just
Tom Sawyer.
Yeah, he just flippantly throws off there, and bing, light goes off in Sawyer's
How about
head.
that?
And the audience has
Sawyer's my name too.
Yeah. And that just, for, again, a storyline of a couple seasons that has been trying to rehabilitate this man, with the poor exception of one tree frog, showed that he's a complicated guy, sweetheart, and only reluctantly kills, when he feels that it is right to do. He is just filled with unquestioned rage. Remember, this has been the driving force of James Ford. He changed his name to Sawyer with the express purpose of killing the man with the same name that ruined his life, that killed his parents, that sent him down this absolutely terrible path. And so Sawyer, from his perspective, is given no other choice but to murder this man in cold blood. He chokes him out with one of the chains.
You want to go to hell? You want to go to hell?
And finally, Josh, one of the biggest villains in the show's history, Locke's father, is dead. And even though Locke did not get the blood on his hands, he certainly will get it on his shirt, as Locke then takes his father's body, slumps it over his shoulders, walks into the other's camp, and flops it down like a dog bringing a bird home.
Yeah, just coffin flops that guy.
I didn't rig shit.
He didn't rig shit.
Locke absolutely rigged for this to happen.
He did rig for this to happen because he had to come back with Anthony Cooper's body, or he wouldn't be allowed into the other's clubhouse no more.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard Alpert, who we saw in Not in Portland, who now seems to be in something of a consigliere role with Ben, basically tells Locke, look, if you're not going to kill this guy, then maybe there's a person here who will do it. And he gives him a file. So we've established this season, we didn't talk about it, that the others have copious notes on the main cast. They have all of this stuff because they used to be able to communicate with the outside world. The Purple Sky shot that. So they're not really able to do that as much anymore. But they have the binders. They've got the dossier. This is how they know that Jack was a spinal surgeon. Oh my God, that's the guy. That's who's here to save me. And so here in this case, Albert's able to give Locke the file on Sawyer. Locke puts it together. Locke is able to get the guy. Locke tells Sawyer two things. Thing one is Juliet is a mole. And he has the audio tape that proves it because he's heard it at the other's camp. And the other thing is, I'm not with them, but I'm not with you. I'm on my own journey now. Locke has officially declared for House Locke, and that's who he cares about.
He's not bending the knee to any civil war that's brewing right now.
That's it. He's already broken, so he's just going to bend now. So yes, this really amazing stretch of episodes continues into The Man Behind the Curtain, which is, here as we reach the home stretch of season 3, it's a Benjamin Linus flashback episode. The great Sterling Beaumont plays a young Benjamin Linus and then Michael Emerson Emerson also plays a young Benjamin Linus.
Oh
and
my God.
really tests the limits of how young we can believe some of these actors can play.
How do you do, fellow kids?
How do you do, fellow kids? As the flashback is going to show that Ben is responsible for the genocide of the Dharma Initiative.
The Purge, they call it.
The Purge is the word. And so Ben teams up with the others. He has a really shitty dad, Uncle Rico. He hates this guy. This guy hates him. Ben's mother died in childbirth, delivering Ben. That's Elsbeth, by the way, isn't it?
She's poking her head in. Yeah, so it's
Carrie Preston, Michael Emerson's real life wife, plays Benjamin Linus's mother.
Feels like there's a complex baked into that. But yeah, we really find out about the origin story of Benjamin Linus, that this is a guy that, despite claiming he was born on the island, it's more metaphorical than literal, as it turns out that he was born in just like a random forest in Portland. His mother died in childbirth, which caused his father, Roger Linus, to become this just like incalcitrant, obstinate drunk who ends up taking up a job as a workman, as a janitor with the Dharma Initiative. And that's how Ben gets brought to the island. Yet in the process of him living this incredibly troubled life, or like the only solace he finds is with this random girl, Annie, he is entertaining some offers from Richard Alpert. Man, talk about stretching the credulity of ages. It seems like they don't really de-age or even age up Nestor Carbonell at all.
They don't really try, it seems like. Richard Alpert, when he meets Ben as a young boy, seems to be the exact same age that Richard Alpert is in the scenes with like Locke, and Ben as an older guy. So ooh-wee, what up with that?
Yeah, and so Ben is going to be given basically this offer by the others. Now, this is a different version of the others, right? The others that we know are led by Ben and lead these civilized lives. These are a group that are known as the Hostiles. This is a group that is more like the others that we had seen walking through the jungle in season 2, that they kind of dress themselves up to be, with Mr. Friendly and the beard and everything. These are people that live on the outskirts, that live off the land, that seem to be more natives of the island than the urban environment that comes with the Dharma Initiative. And Ben is basically being told that your time will come. You just have to be patient. And we find out on one of his birthday, many, but seemingly not many years later, considering it's still technically, it's supposed to be Michael Emerson, a much younger version of him. We see him and his dad are working side by side. They drive a familiar-looking Dharma van out to an outlook, and Ben puts on a gas mask and kills his father. And it turns out that Ben is a mole, in a manner of speaking, and helps let the Hostiles in as they effectively kill what seems to be every other member of the Dharma Initiative. Josh, a real Order 66 moment for them.
Kills them all. Killed them all, of course. So Ben the Jinx Linus has taken them all down. Meanwhile, in the present, John has come back. He's got Tony Cooper delivered. He says, all right, take me to your leader. He wants to meet Jacob, who is this mysterious man who is purportedly like the king of the island, if not the others. And that this is who they take their marching orders from. They have lists. They go out with their lists. They pick people up. And so, but Jacob only talks to Ben. And if Locke is really as special as everybody says that he is, and if his destiny is to be in charge of these people, then he would like an audience with the man behind the curtain, the name of the episode. But much like the idea of the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz, is it just a guy? Is it not? Is there no wizard? Is it just a guy? That seems to be what happens when Michael Emerson leads Terry O'Quinn to a cabin in the woods and is just talking to a chair. And Locke seems to think that like this is a bunch of hooey, and he goes to leave, and then he hears a voice. He hears someone say, "Help me, Winston." and
it's Gozer.
and the cabin goes nuts. The cabin goes crazy. There's lots of crazy shit in the cabin that, like, for funsies, worth pausing down and, like,
yeah, it's very much
parsing
worth
out.
pausing, particularly
Like dog painting, weird dog painting.
there's a wipe across to the chair that you could swear for a second you see
There's like a dude in
somebody
there. Yep, for sure. And Ben seems to be really taken aback that all of this is possible, and is starting to, give Ben more and more of this complex of, okay, so has the island selected Locke and not me? Locke, who has also been like, this island cured my paralysis. This
Mhm.
island gave you cancer. And so Locke is really like rubbing Ben's face in it. And so Ben is getting a real good hate into Locke at this point. And now that the cabin and this guy has seemingly spoken to Locke, when it does seem like Ben's just maybe been making this up all along, Ben is feeling a real kind of way about it. And so he takes Locke to the burial site of the Dharma Initiative, tells him, I'm one of the people who was smart enough to stay out of that ditch, which makes me considerably smarter than you, John. And he shoots him. He shoots John Locke in the chest, in like a bullet hole that looks like, oh, well, that guy should not be able to survive this at all. And he falls
and
back.
Mikhail's like, watch me.
He falls back. Also, John earlier in this episode kicks the shit out of Mikhail.
Yeah, because Mikhail shows up at camp to try to like warn Ben as to because he does end up escaping after he ends up healing Naomi, and then Locke just takes out a lot of stuff because he's like, oh my god, you're still alive.
He's got so much rage, and so Ben shoots Locke. Locke, he asks him, "What did Jacob say to you?" And he says, "Help me." This is a little late for that, John. He goes, "No, that's what he said. Help me." And so Ben just I forget exactly what he says. He says something like, well, I certainly hope he can help you, John, or some
some
dickhead
like
move like
snarky
that.
one-liner before he leaves Locke on the top of a mass grave.
And so you're kind of left being like, okay, I don't know how he's going to get out of that one. And like, with the exception of 2 scenes, you don't see Locke again for the rest of the season. So they really just leave Locke for dead. And that's kind of crazy.
Well, speaking of Left 4 Dead.
Greatest hits.
This picture breaks my heart.
The picture on the YouTube version is Charlie hugging Hurley. Charlie comes to accept that his time has run out and that in order for everybody else to live, he must die, because Desmond has a flash forward, a vision of the future in which Charlie swims down into an underwater Dharma station, pushes a button, drowns.
And then you drown.
And then like helicopters, Claire gets on a helicopter, people get rescued. And the only way for all of that to happen, Charlie, you gotta drown. This time, Charlie, you have to die.
It's the penultimate episode.
Yeah, we gotta set up the stakes for the finale, brother.
So let's talk about how those stakes get there.
Yes.
So this entire time, Naomi has been brought back to the 815 camp, and she has this big old chunky satellite phone that she should be using ideally to get into contact with a freighter that's located right off the island that should bring people over to rescue them. Only problem is the signal's jammed. Juliet reveals that is on purpose. There is actually, some of you have heard this before, a Dharma station that is actually underwater that can jam up the radar to prevent communication on and off the island. It is called the Looking Glass.
Yeah.
And so the plan is to swim down to this station, which is thought of to be one of these other abandoned Dharma stations that's completely underwater. They're going to swim down there, flip a switch to basically turn off the signal blocker, get through to help, and bring rescue over. Happy ending. Everyone kisses. Closing credits. So Charlie decides to make the sacrifice play here. Even though he claims at the moment he is one of the best swimmers you would ever meet, he basically knows, at least in the moment, that he is set there on a one-way trip. He is going to flip the switch, save everybody else, and drown in the process. As all of this is happening, a couple of things are occurring. One, Carl, who had made his way back to the main island alongside Sawyer and Kate, comes to the camp with a foreboding warning. The others are coming. They have a plan to close in and finally take out this group once and for all. So they now have to plan sort of a counterattack to what's going on with the others. At the same time, they're also going to go to a radio tower because the radio tower should give out the best signal to be able to communicate with the freighter. Remember the radio tower from the opening episodes? They're going to go back there. Meanwhile, Charlie is compiling a list of his titular greatest hits, 5 moments of his life that basically made him who he is. It runs the gamut from, him learning to swim for the first time to the most crushing and most recent of them all, The Night I Met You, which is when Charlie
Claire
first laid eyes on Claire, and he will leave Aaron with his DS ring, which doesn't stand for drive shaft, I believe.
But it is. It's his ancestral sigil.
Yeah, that Liam ends up giving him during like a rare moment of love between the two. And so, yeah, this is just really one big setup for Charlie to kind of say his farewells, even though a select few people only know that it will be his final farewell.
Yeah, his farewell with Hurley is that you're too fat. You
can't come with me.
He fat shames Hurley to sort of like old Yeller him away.
But what's interesting is that maybe in echoes of the end of Catch-22, Desmond decides to go with Charlie and decides, no, this won't be the time that it happens. I am going to be the one to help you to do this. And Charlie knocks Desmond out at the moment and says, nope, I've committed myself to this. I'm pot committed. I'm all in. No half measures.
No half measures. So he's going to go down, and it's going to lead us directly in to the season 3 finale through the looking glass. The image we're looking at here, not Penny's boat. So let's just talk this whole section through because there's lots of different sections to the episode, and let's just stay on Charlie, Mike.
Yeah, it's a complete surprise. Lost goes to many different locations over its 2-hour finale. So it turns out Charlie swims through the moon pool on the looking glass, and there's air there. Wait a minute, this station isn't abandoned. No, it certainly is not. As it turns out that 2 people are actually manning it or womaning it, as it were. Charlie is going to be captured. Desmond will eventually swim through and show up and help subdue these 2 women. And Mikhail will also be sent by Ben to try to stop the switch from being flipped at the looking glass station, only for him to get a freaking harpoon through his chest, courtesy of Desmond. Charlie is going to be able to make his way to the room, and he is going to unflip the switch. The signal is unjammed. He looks on the screen behind him, and a familiar woman shows up, though not familiar to Charlie. It is Penelope Widmore. Charlie is thrilled because of the fact that there was a photo of Desmond and Penny in Naomi's jacket. The assumption held by everybody is that, this is Penny Widmore's boat. It's assumed by us, right? We saw the season 2 finale when Penny has been searching for Desmond and for the island. And so he talks about like, oh yeah, we have Naomi, the satellite phone. We got in contact with your boat. And she says, what boat? I didn't send a boat. And just as that revelation is coming into frame is, for some reason, Mikhail, like a cartoon villain, holding up a grenade, which just blasts a hole into the side of the.
And finally kills Mikhail, by the way.
Finally kills Mikhail.
He can't survive that. No.
But fills the station with water. This is when Charlie finally decides to officially make the sacrifice play. He closes off the chamber that he's in, separating Desmond from Penny, who is right in the other room on the monitor. And as Charlie accepts the slow accumulating sense of death that is coming over him, he scrawls one final message to communicate to Desmond. It's one of the most iconic images in the show's history. He writes on his hand in a Sharpie that he's kept with him ever since the late days in season 1, not Penny's boat. He puts it on the window. Desmond looks at it, nods. Charlie solemnly nods. And as Michael Giacchino's beautiful score plays, he loses all his breath and lifelessly floats to the surface of the water.
Charlie dies.
And it's also contrasted with Aaron all of a sudden bursting into a crying fit as they are walking to the radio station, which is almost like, dogs and babies are the first to know. But it is one of the most,
And
heartbreaking scenes.
Naomi's like satellite phone suddenly now can work, and she said, "What was your boyfriend's name? Charlie. Charlie just saved our lives."
Yeah, not knowing, of course, the pure irony that this is not Penny's boat. It is an absolutely incredible scene. Say what you want to about what happens with this character over the course of season 2,
They
but
send him off in style.
they absolutely do. Dominic Monaghan, one of the main forces I think brought a lot of people, myself included, into Lost. Charlie was a big favorite character in the first season, and they really end him on a high note in true musician fashion.
It's a gutsy story turn. Charlie is one of the big three at the start of the show. It's him, Jack, and Kate, and like here we are halfway through Lost, and they kill him off. And I think like, look, there's more heartache to come. This show will not, always treat your favorites well.
To spoil the title of the next episode we'll speak about, it's the beginning of the end,
It's
truly.
the beginning of the end, and I think like Charlie's death sort of really signals that. And like despite like there's so many incredible moments still to come on the show, I think Charlie's death is kind of like the iconic death of the show. I think, would you say, Mike?
I would say so. I think the fact that
there's a few, but this is really, really, really high, if not number one on that list.
Well, remember, this is something that has been built up since what, like episode 7 or 9 of this season. And this is like a 20 episode season. This has been a long time coming, and it's also incredibly climactic. And it also has this big twist baked in as well. It's not just a character dying for the sake of dying. It then comes with also this irony and this big reveal on top of it of, oh yeah, remember this entire back season arc of, oh my God, we're finally going to get rescued. Penny's come for us. Penny and Desmond get to be reunited. Nope. So if it wasn't Penny's boat, then
whose boat is it?
Whose boat is it?
And so also, like, is Desmond's vision accurate? And like you certainly hope so, because Desmond was like, Charlie, you got to die for the vision to come true. So like, we don't know. And now there's like this additional wrinkle of like, we got to hope that Charlie's vision comes through. Otherwise, like, what did he die for? But also, like, for Charlie's vision to come through, what does that mean? If this is like, if this boat belongs to people who they don't claim to be, which is, of course, like the other big plot line of the episode, which is going towards the radio tower, trying to signal to the other boat. The others are coming. Saeed and Jin and Bernard stay behind to kill the others,
right,
but they get bested.
Right. They have like a Rambo mission where their plan is, okay, we know the others are coming to us, so everyone else leave. We're going to stay behind, set up some dynamite, and like shoot it at precise moments to blow up the others. That gets quite literally shot to sunshine when they end up getting captured. And there's this really gutting scene where Ben
meets like high noon with Jack, and he's like, I'm going to kill your guys.
He has them up at the pass of like, don't keep going, or I'm going to tell my guys to kill your friends. We have them captured right now. It just turned out that, the 3 of them are tied up in the sand, and all we hear over the radio is 3 shots fire. And that's going to cause Jack to
beat the shit out of Ben.
Yeah. And maybe the second most cathartic moment of the season, besides Nicky and Paulo getting buried alive. Jack just goes absolute 8-shit and beats Ben to a pulp. And Ben actually gets captured by the 815ers in the process. Turns out later, no, there's only so much death that can go around in the finale. They're fine. But it turns out that Hurley will be the one to draw more blood than the others, as he's going to double back and just get in his newfound
Dharma band. Yeah, Tristan Tanaka is dead, and so are the others because of Hurley driving into them.
He plows into them, and Sawyer actually does get a bit of blood on his hands. He kills Mr. Friendly in cold blood, saying, that one's for the kid.
That one's for the kid. Speaking of the kid, we get a Walt sighting in the finale as a taller ghost, Walt. As we see, like, Malcolm David Kelly is growing up. So, like, it was going to be hard to keep him around. He shows up in front of a dying John Locke and tells him, don't die. You've got more work to do.
Yeah.
The hell is this?
I have no idea. Is this an apparition like the many we have seen? And if so, could there be something behind it? As we saw with Yemi, we know that Walt certainly has powers. Could this be him projecting himself in some way like he did with Shannon? Who's to say? But regardless, something or some power has gotten Locke out of this grave and from the brink of death to cause death in his wake instead.
So they round up Ben, and Ben, like maybe like kind of like in hindsight, knowing what Charlie wrote down, Ben's like, "Don't let the boat come here.
Yep.
We'll all die. It
You're
won't be
gonna regret.
good.
Yeah, every
You're gonna
single person
regret
on
it."
this island will die.
And so like that's a lot more ominous once Charlie has the not Penny's boat. But they all get to the radio tower, and Jack's about to make the call. But then Locke shows up and throws a knife into Naomi in the back. And he says, "I'll shoot you, Jack. I'll shoot you with this little revolver here if you make the call." This is the first time that Jack and Locke are interacting since Locke blew up the submarine, which was the first time they had previously interacted since Anna Lucia died.
Probably, yeah. It's in the wake of Henry Gale escaping because
So like,
that's when...
this like is a very central dynamic on the show is Jack versus Locke, and they've been really on their own journeys this season. Now it collides here in this moment where Locke tells Jack, "You're not supposed to make that call." But Jack is done listening to Locke, and so he makes the call. And someone on the other side is like, "Yo, that's great. We're gonna track your signal. We're all gonna come," and it's jubilant, and everyone is very excited.
Yeah, we also mentioned finally mother and daughter are reunited. Alex and Danielle, where they just think of like, were you born 16 years ago? Just random question. And finally, Rousseau gets a happy moment to join in with everyone else's happy moments. As it seems like finally, after being stranded on the island,
It's like
for
we
3
did it.
seasons, yeah, rescue has
End
come.
of show.
We had the false starts with the RHAP.
We beat the show. We
now-
won. We won Lost.
Exactly. Lost is coming to an end, maybe more quickly than we might think. Or is it?
Or
Josh?
is it? As the entire episode also has this whole other story that seems to be a flashback to a time when Jack was at his lowest. He was, popping pills. He's drunk. He's flying airplanes. He saves a kid from a car accident.
Yeah, he's about to actually jump off a bridge, but a car accident happens behind him, and so he kind of hesitantly forces himself into hero mode once more.
He jumps into the fray. He's also very upset by something he has read in the obituary section of a newspaper that somebody is deceased. He goes to a funeral parlor called Hofstrawler, which ends up being an anagram for flash forward. And in this major twist at the end of the episode, which was code named by the writers, the rattlesnake in the mailbox. You go to open the mail thinking it's just any other day. You're just going to get mail, but surprise, it's a rattlesnake. This ain't a flashback. It's a flash forward. Kate shows up to meet with Jack at an airport, and Jack makes it very clear. We were never supposed to leave. I'm sick of lying. We were not supposed to leave. We have to go back, Kate. We have to go back, he bellows at her. And minds across the world watching the Lost Season 3 finale absolutely leak out of their ears. It's a huge moment that shows as we close the end of book 1 of Lost and get into the second of the 2 books that, okay, they're not always going to be on this island. They're going to get off. That's great. Seems like the plan worked. However, it seems like maybe leaving was bad. And so why? What happened? Why was leaving so bad? Why does Jack, of all people, want to go back? And will they? And like, what needs to happen to kind of like get us in position for all of that? So that's very much the second half of the show. Now that like an official ending is on the radar, is on the calendar, 6 seasons and out, we've got 3 seasons left to explore these questions. And we will not waste much time once we get into season 4. No, I don't want to say anything about what you're going to get in season 4 other than like continuations of everything that has happened. Certainly here in this finale, we're going to keep going. The pedal to the metal. The only thing we'll say is what Mike said earlier. The very next episode, the season 4 premiere, is called The Beginning of the End. And it certainly is.
And I think it's actually very similar to Desmond's declaration to Charlie of "you're gonna die." We now have not necessarily an end point, but a point to work towards. This is happening at some point in the future. So who left the island? We know it's Jack and Kate. Is there anybody else who did? Did everyone on 815 leave? How did they leave the island? Yes, Desmond had this vision of people getting on the helicopter, but we were just informed that this is not the rescue that they thought it was. So how did they do this? And to your point, most importantly, why does Jack want to go back? Was this spurred along by a funeral that he attended? Or was it something else that is driving him into just when he thought he hit rock bottom in Thailand, somehow finding like a sub basement beneath that and being, on the brink of suicide, popping pills like a madman, growing out his beard to extraordinary lengths? What drove the hero of our story to this place? It just deliciously opens up so much that makes you want to say, in true John Locke fashion back in orientation,
we're going to need to watch that again.
Or just keep watching in this case, because y'all have access to it. And so, again, we won't reveal too much, but suffice it to say, season 4 is going to focus a lot on how we get to this point in so many ways. And it's going to really interestingly set up also, from a time-based perspective, Lost has 3 seasons, and then the writer's strike happens back in the 2007 writer strike, I should say, now that we've had
there's a lot behind the scenes that we're going to be able to bring into the picture here for our season 4 conversation. A riveting season of television, I think.
So good. I think a lot of people feel like after season 2, maybe they felt like it was a bit of a misstep, that it had some high highs in the form of stuff like 2 for the Road, but it was a little bit of us kind of plotting our feet along. Why are we in a hatch for so long? What's all this mystery, et cetera, et cetera. By the end of this season, this felt like such a return to form. Again, it was a stretch of episodes even stronger than some of the best that season 1 had to offer, in my opinion, with the brig through the looking glass. I think the death of Charlie, it's almost akin to a drowning in a way that, unlike Echo or unlike characters like Boone, Ana Lucia, Libby, it is not part of sudden shock. It is instead sort of just like this slow realization of what is happening, not only over the episode, but the entire season. You still have big twists baked in of, okay, is Locke on team other now? What is he doing? What's going to happen to the others now? It seems like the Losties have won for the time being. Ben
they
has
got
been
their
subdued.
leader.
Yeah, exactly. What is going to happen that leaves Jack in such turmoil? Where do we go from here? Everyone who was still watching Lost was firmly back on board by the time Jack uttered, "We have to go back." And it just was such an exciting time to be a fan as we lie in wait for many months, unfortunately, until season 4 rounded the corner.
The season 3 finale is a banger.
Mm-hmm. Some would argue the best episode of the show.
It's certainly in that conversation for sure. Spoiler alert: the season 4 finale also a banger. We've got a lot of really crazy shit still ahead of us. So you've got 1 week to watch all of season 4, the shortest season of the show by.
Good news, if you're a fan of modern TV seasons, or I would actually say more so TV seasons from like the 2010s, it's right in that wheelhouse, because it's 13 episodes, including the 3-hour finale?
It was supposed to be 16. Like, the plan was it was going to be like 3 more seasons of 16 episodes, but there's a writer's strike that happens. We'll talk about that. So it ends up being a really condensed, shortened season. There's some ways in which I think you feel that negatively, but a lot of ways ultimately in which you feel that quite positively towards the end game of season 4. So it should be a pretty quick watch for you. So check it out. Season 4 of Lost. Make sure you've watched it, or else you want to be spoiled by Mike and I here on Lost for First Timers on Down the Hatch, as we're continuing to talk about Lost for the very first time in a spoiler-free capacity. I'm having a blast, Mike. I hope that you are as well.
As blasted as that damn submarine.
And I hope that all of you are enjoying this as well. If you are, make sure you are subscribed to Down the Hatch. Rob has a website.com/DTH. Rob has a website.com/Down the Hatch, I think actually is what you want. You can subscribe. Just find us Down the Hatch, RHAP, wherever you get your podcasts. We would love to hear and see from you. If you want to send us email, downthehatchrhap@gmail.com. Once we are finished with this mini series, we will get into all of your feedback from along the way. So keep sending us anything that you've got about Lost, observations from a rewatch if you're rewatching it, notes from a first watch, especially the really funny ones we will read once we hit the end of the line here. And on the other side of Lost, we will be resuming our conversations about Battlestar Galactica, which Mike is watching for the first time. I've seen it before, so it is also a friendly listen for people who are watching Battlestar Galactica for the very first time. When we resume, we will be at season 3, so your simultaneous homework assignment is to catch up with seasons 1 and 2 and the mini series of BSG. So go and seek all of that out. I believe it's on Hulu right now. So we're looking at an October return for the Battlestar Galactica coverage. So make sure you're diving into all of that good stuff. Make sure you're following Mike Bloom at a Mike Bloom type wherever you can find Mike Bloom on the internet. He's got a lot of stuff going on, including the Survivor 47 cast has just dropped. So you want to check out Mike Bloom's parade coverage as your preseason with the latest and greatest of the Survivor gang. We have to go back to the islands of Fiji.
Yes, I have dropped in with coverage, much like Naomi, in a parachute. And as these people are trying to leave an island on Lost, we're talking about bringing people to an island in the form of Survivor. As per usual, I got the chance to talk with all 18 castaways prior to them beginning the game. So if you want to know anything and everything about these contestants, I'm releasing them 2 a day in written form at parade.com. And then Rob and I are showing the video interviews as well and doing a little bit of our commentary as well over on Rob Has a Podcast. So if you are a Survivor fan, you got a big old dollop of island coming your way in the form of Survivor, which is interesting. We should be sort of like ebbing out of this project as Survivor 47 kind of flows in to occupy that space.
Pretty close. So make sure you're checking out all of that good stuff. I don't know what's going on with me.
As the owl a hurlybird?
I think I'm flashing forward at this moment in time to next week's conversation here on Down the Hatch when we go back to season 4 of Lost for first-time viewers. Until then, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.